Hi there, dear friends. I'm so glad you're joining me today, and I thought I'm going to share with you an idea to make lovely patchwork hearts that you could use either in card making or for tags, table centerpieces. You could back them back to back. Yeah, just a lovely idea. You stretch your imagination. So I'm going to use a piece of A4 paper as my base that I'm going to be sticking my fabric down onto, and I've got a very dark solid color, which is this red with the little gold dots, and I've got a bit of gingham, and I just thought these would be rather fun. So with the gingham, I think I'm going to just use these blocks as a guide and maybe make my squares. I think I'll do squares of fabric probably about 6 centimeters wide. So I'm going to just use the block. It's not precise, but I'm just going to use the lines on the gingham just to cut through. Okay, so I'm going to snip this bit off here that's all raggedy, and I could use this for one of my other projects. I do quite a lot with scrap fabric. So I'm going to cut several strips this width, and I'm just using this as a guideline. As I say, it doesn't have to be precise. It's not genuine patchwork where you're stitching it together and you need to match your seams. And then I'm going to cut similar sized pieces with my other plain solid color, and I'll use this as a guide as well. So I would imagine I probably need about 10 pieces of this, I would think. What I love about this method of using this patchwork for making a card or some tags is that it doesn't take long to prepare, and once you've actually made your hearts, you have a whole stash of them ready for any occasion. If you're certainly doing this kind of thing for a season like Christmas, you'd have a lot of cards in no time at all. And I will link some of the videos that I've done on those ones in the description box for you below. Right, I think we'll just see how we go with what we've got here in the gingham, and let's cut some of the solid block red. So this is already in a strip. I can't remember what I made with this, so I'm just going to lay this down and cut through. And because the fabric is folded over, I'm getting 2 pieces at a time, which is also, as we'd say in South Africa, a bon seller or a bonus. So it makes it a lot easier. There you go. I find this is just a brilliant way to use up scraps, and your scraps wouldn't have to be blocks as I'm doing today. You could have irregular shapes, do it like a crazy patchwork. But they do look really lovely once they've been made up. Right, let's see how we go with what we've cut already. So put that aside for now. Right, so this next part of the process is really easy. All you're going to do is put a generous layer of glue down onto your paper, and then start to lay down fabric, and I do overlap them slightly so that they actually don't show any gaps of white if possible. Right, so I've got a glue stick. Try and get to the corners if you can, but all the fabric will be secured a little bit later when we do some stitching. So first piece of fabric, I think I'll do that so that that hangs off the edge there, and then I'm going to overlap this edge. I quite like the texture. Oh, silly me, got the cap on. I quite like this texture of the frayed edge, so I'm going to leave that and just put the next layer so that it slightly overlaps that. It just adds a bit of interest, I think. Might just be me. And I'm going to alternate my colors. So I'm going to do a light and a dark and a dark and a light. Just remembering just to put a piece of glue where you overlap your fabrics. So I'm going to put a piece of glue down this side here and across the top of the previous layer. Maybe I should fill in this gap first, then we don't have a big bunching of fabric. And there I am going to do that with the gingham. So I'm going to put the gingham up against the red fabric. If I've got a little bit of a gap on the side, it's not too serious because I probably won't. Oh, hang on. I'm running into a colour problem here, aren't I? No, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave that and just go with the flow. Right, so I've got another fluffy edge. Just find a piece that's going to fit in there. Oh, here we go. Put that one in there. And then I'm going to just trim off the excess here, which is a little point. Right, so I'm going to start on the right hand side now, and I'm going to put plain colour in here because I feel that we're getting a lot of gingham. So let's do that first. And this is just building up layers. I mean, you could have more colours if you wished. Alright, I should have maybe worked with 3 thinking about it, because then I wouldn't have these colours meeting like this in the middle, but it doesn't matter. They're not all going to be on the same piece of design, so let's put, let's put this one vertically. Put that like that. And if I put a vertical one over here, maybe I can save the day. So let's do that. Oopsie, 2 pieces of fabric. I do often find that sometimes you're in a hurry to do things and you don't really think things out, and you have gaps and doubles up of all sorts of things, but it doesn't matter because sometimes the accidents are happy. Oh gosh, I remember once I was asked to give a talk at a church to a group of 200 women, which was fine. I wasn't nervous about that. But the space that I had to work in was terribly difficult because there were all kinds of pillars and posts in the middle of the hall, and I had to try and show them how to make something around these pillars and posts. And I thought, what on earth am I going to do? And then I thought, I can show them how to do glass painting, and we still had things called overhead projectors in those days. So I grabbed hold of an overhead projector and I prepared all this work. I'd done a big piece of glass that I was going to paint on. I'd done all the outlines. I'd done a little bit of painting on there just as a start. And one of my staff members came along and accidentally spilt a whole bowl of sugar all over the design that I had just prepared, and I wanted to weep. I just thought, I can't actually believe that this has happened. I had to go and do that talk that afternoon, so I mean I really was tight, and now I had all this sugar in the glass paint, and I thought, well, the only thing I can do is to actually put more sugar on to make it look as though it is part of the design. And once it dried, let me tell you what the design was first of all. The design was an angel surrounded by a halo with her wings, and the sugar had actually fallen into the wing part. And once I had painted a bit more paint on and I put some more sugar on and left it to dry, it just gave the wings the most incredible quality. And I just thought, well, there's a happy accident for you. So that was that journey. So don't get too fussed. Right, we've filled up our sheet now. The glue is still wet, so you can see it's not going to stitch easily through the machine, and it's not going to cut easily with a pair of scissors. So I'm going to leave this to dry, and then I'm going to come back and show you what to do the next step. You can at this stage trim off any bits that hang over the edge of the paper. Yeah, so we're happy, we'll go with that, and I'll be back in a minute. I've allowed my fabric to dry, and I've hauled out some stencils which have heart designs on. I have 2 different designs. I had that one which is a fairly open heart, which I think for my cards would be a little bit wide, and I have this stencil design which is a more sort of uniform design, so I'm going to use it. If you're wanting to know where it is from, it's from Plaid. I don't know if they still make them. I've had this one for years, but I'm sure you would find a heart template online, if not a wooden one, or you could just simply go online and download a template and then maybe just glue it to a piece of cardboard for the purposes. Now bear in mind that if we're making cards, they'll probably be quarter the size unless you're making a different one. I'm going to stick with these smaller sized hearts just so that I'm actually not going to find I've got a problem a little bit later on. So I'm going to place my stencil down onto my piece of paper on the back, and I'm going to use a colored pencil just to do the outline, more so that you could see. If you're at home, you could use a normal pencil. And I'm just going to do a row of hearts, giving myself a little bit of a gap between each heart so that I've got space for cutting, and that I'm sure that I'm not going to have too much of a problem when it comes to that. Right, I'm wanting this size, aren't I? Silly me, doing the wrong size here. Well, why not try a bigger one? It will fit there. I'm going to fill my page with hearts, and if they're not all the same size, that's not the end of the world. One thing I find when I'm working with hearts, if I flip the page over, I tend to get a few more in than if I were doing them all the same way around. Don't know if you find that as well. Just somehow it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces fit together. Right, so you'll probably be seeing by now that we're going to get quite a load of hearts out of one piece of paper that we've put the fabric on, and that's really fantastic because it means that you'll have a nice stash at the end of the day. You could, if you wanted to, also make these into decorations, or you could make them into like a little hanging where you could stick two of the same size back to back, but that's entirely up to you, and that's a project for another day. So let's just fill this all up. Do a couple more biggish ones. Now let's rather stick with the formula. They're going to fit better on this piece of paper. More biggie here. And then I think I'm going to start doing some smaller ones, because you might want to put a different sentiment on your card that takes up a bit more space, or you might want to put some other embellishments. So this will just give you the option of having a bit more space if you have a smaller heart, or you could have 2 or 3 hearts on the same card. So let's do a couple of these little ones. And then if I flip this over, will I get one of those? No, but I could probably do this size. There we go. And let's see what I can fit in on here. Don't be afraid of turning your designs around so that you maximize your page. There's nothing wrong in that. This is probably the size heart that I would use most of, I think. Maybe, let's see, that's too big, definitely. That one's too big. Yeah, we'll stick with that. Do another one that size. By flipping the design, obviously the fabrics are going to look different too, aren't they? So that will be interesting. And let's do one of these here. And one of these ones here. You could obviously just stick with one size. I mean, there's nothing wrong in that. I just thought for demonstration purposes it would be quite nice to have a whole selection. Right, let's fill up our page now. Where you've got little gaps, why not use them? They would also make a rather nice little pins, I think. You know, if you were doing something for a fundraiser, you could make them sort of a shabby chic one, because by the time we've cut them, the edges will fray a little bit, and then you would have a nice piece that you could maybe back this onto a piece of felt and make a pin. Right, let's just see if we've got any more spaces that we need to fill. Too big, we'll go that size. There we go. And in here. Right, I think we've done pretty well here. Got a nice selection of different sizes and we've got loads. So the next step that I'm going to do now is to go to the sewing machine, and I need to stitch on the inside line of all these designs. So that means that when I get to my sewing machine, I'm going to be doing either a running stitch, or you could do an embroidery stitch all the way around these edges here, because I'm going to be cutting just on this outside of this blue line, and I need to make sure that all those pieces of fabric are secured. So let me go and do that, and I'll come back and show you the next step. I love the way the fabric has turned out, and you will see here that there's quite a lot of stitching that I've done in white. So what I've done is to go around the edges of each of the pieces of fabric just to secure them onto the paper, and then I've gone around the edges of the larger hearts with some white stitching. If I flip this over, you'll see that there are many more hearts that have been drawn on here, but I must be honest that when I started to try and stitch around anything smaller than this, it became quite difficult. So I have decided on this section here to do some heavy stitching, and I just used a wavy pattern just so that all those little pieces would be secure. I didn't want as much on these smaller hearts here, so I'm going to cut these out first, and if necessary I will do some stitching on those a little bit later. Okay, so let's have some fun. First of all, I'm just going to loosen some of these off, because it does seem to be a bit awkward always to cut with a huge piece of paper. And I know when I was teaching decoupage, I used to watch people struggle to cut out things, because they would start at one end of the paper and need to get to the other side and not really think about loosening things off. So just to demonstrate and show you what some of these look like, let's cut this one out. I'm cutting on just on the outside edge of this blue line, and I think each of them will be a surprise, because we never know what the fabric's going to look like on the other side. So we've cut the shape out. Okay, so we've got a little bit of red on that one. That's reasonably plain, but I'm okay with that. This next one, I feel I've been cutting through a piece of fabric, so let's see what's on the other side. And you'll notice just as a cutting tip, I'm moving the paper rather than the scissors. Oh, that's lovely. Look at that. A little bit of gingham at the top. Right. Let's have a sneak peek at this one. Oh, that's a plain one. That's alright, because it's nice to mix and match. And here's a smally one. So this one I think I'm going to need to do some work on. I could hand stitch a few little stitches, or I could actually just see if it needed a bit more glue. Oh, that's a rinky-dinky little one. I'm very happy with that. Okay, so those ones will be largely plain. So let's have a look at some of these on this side. And this one that I'm cutting out now, I used a wavy pattern stitch just to secure it down. I'm not sure that I'm overly fond of it, but it might look better once the design is cut out than it did when I had a massive stitching on the page. So let's have a look and see. Oh, that's not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. So I mean, if you've got a load of embroidery stitches on your machine, you could certainly use those. But as I say, as the hearts got smaller, it became more and more tricky to actually start to stitch around them, especially when you've got a piece of paper that doesn't want to flex so easily and you've got to get it through the arm of the machine. So you do have to sometimes adjust your plans. Right, that's lovely. Look how nicely that one's turned out. Right, I'm going to continue cutting and we'll see how many we get out. Managed now to get quite a lot of hearts out of my one page, and in addition to that, because I had some fabric left over, I've just cut out freehand a whole lot more different assorted sizes and shapes of little hearts, just to maximize on that. So I'm now going to get out my card so that we can actually make some greeting cards with this. So having cut out all my hearts, I found that I had some scrap pieces of the paper over, so I just cut out a lot of random small little ones like that, just to make use of that space. So I'm going to make with you now 3 very, very simple cards, and they are simple simply because I just have played around with a few different ideas, and I just like the simplicity of the ones that I have. So the first one is just going to be using the plain hearts. I'm going to simply put some glue on the back, and I'm just using Elmer's glue here, not spreading it right to the edges, because obviously when I press down on this it's going to squish sideways a little. And I'm just going to eyeball that into the center, and then I've got 2 smaller ones to go on either side, to be able to make up my last little sort of section. Murphy's law, isn't it? You turn the bottle upside down and the glue all runs to the wrong side. Whoopsie, now it's come out in a rush. Okay, so let me just spread that a little bit more evenly. In fact, I'm just going to wipe some off, because that's probably too much and will ooze out. And I'm going to just gently pat that into place there. And I'm going to do the one on the other side as well. I really did play around with a lot of different ideas to be able to still come back to my original concept that I had drawn out before I started even filming the video. So there's the first one. It's just 3 simple little hearts in a row. I love the simplicity of it. I love the fact that the hearts all have a little bit of gingham and a little bit of red, and it's just that lovely contrast between the red and the white. So I'm going to set that aside and let it dry, and we'll move on to the next one. So for the next card, I would like to have 3 hearts of different sizes in a row like this, and I'd like them to be linked on a piece of ribbon and secured with a button. So my idea here is that this button has a nice flat back, and I'm going to thread the ribbon through from one side to the other like that. And this is a lovely ribbon. It's a 3mm double-sided satin ribbon, which I got when I had my shop back in South Africa, and it's just gorgeous. But I have not been able to, well, I wasn't able to in South Africa to get any more. The weird thing was that we had this ribbon manufacturer that lived along the coast, and they made the most gorgeous ribbons, but they wouldn't sell in South Africa. They always sold outside, you know, to the continent. So I've just made a little sort of point just so that I can get that through to the other side, because as you know, when you're threading through from one side to the other, then the ends fluff a little bit and it's not so easy. So I'm going to pull this fairly snugly so I don't have too much of a tail underneath. I don't know if you can see that, about that, so that when I come to glue my button down, that will be in place. Now the next thing that I want to do is that I'm going to find it really difficult to put a piece of, well, put some glue onto this ribbon because it's so thin. So I think what I'm going to rather do is put ribbon, the glue on the back of the heart, glue that to the ribbon, and then I'll glue the hearts down. So let me just get that in play. I'm going to turn my card sideways to be able to do this, and I'm going to turn my little, oh, am I off frame now? Turn my button upside down so that I'd have the front facing upwards, and I'm going to position my hearts in place. And if I'm just wanting to get an idea of spacing, that is my frame there, so I need to just get my spacing correct. Maybe bring the ribbon down a bit, move the hearts together, probably more or less like that, I would imagine. Right, so let's just take that bottom one and the top and just see how the spacing would work out when you look at it from the front of the card. Now, I'd want those to be a little bit closer together and that to be in the center. Great. So now that I've got my idea of the spacing, I'm going to just take the end of my ribbon here And I'm going to snip this little bit off because I know that that's not needed. And then if I come back to turning this all over, I'm going to put a little bit of glue on this biggest heart and glue this one end down. And just do try and position this so that you've got a pleasing eye line so that the ribbon is centered. There we go, I just want that in the end. Don't worry about any glue that smudges on the sides here because that is going to be glued down onto your card and you won't see it. Now you need to make sure that your ribbon is drying the right way, and I've glued that the wrong way around, so let's just flip it over. There we go. It's actually not going to matter because this will all be behind when this gets stuck on the card. I just want to get that little bit of glue away from the top. Right, so the next one I'm going to glue will be this. You can see I'm not a really good card maker. Just put a little smidgen of glue there, line it up so that that's in line with the point of the heart and the little V on the heart, and spread that glue down. And if you were anxious about turning it over, you could always just leave it to dry before you glued it down onto your base. So I'm just going to lift the ribbon up here and do exactly the same on this side here. So I've got a fairly evenly spaced progression of different sized hearts, and I'm just going to put a tiny little blob of glue underneath here just so that it just grips while I'm busy working. Now, in order to successfully transfer this across onto my card without making a sticky mess, I am going to leave this to dry, so I'll be back in a minute or two. So the glue has just firmed up enough for me to be able to continue to work, and I'm simply going to just take my glue, which I'm using the Elmer's school glue. I just find it's a really nice thin glue to use, and I'm just doing a couple of dots near enough to the outside edge so that if I'm pressing down on my design on the fabric from the front, that it's not going to smush out on the sides. I'm not putting any glue whatsoever on the thin ribbon because I just know myself I will make that a big mess. So I'm very carefully now going to just take the button in one hand. So I just need to get my fingers here, and I'm going to hold that and turn it over, let this hang and grab the point of the hearts, and then I'm just going to position it, make sure that my ribbon lies flat, and press that down. Right, so if I'm going to come this way now to have a look, I'm not going to get a big mess where the ribbon is because I haven't put any glue there, but I do want to make sure that my hearts are well and truly secured onto the card. I can come back with a button if I need to put another little dab of glue underneath there, which might be the case, but for now I'm just going to leave that as is, and then I can put a sentiment on the side. So that's card number 2. And then I had quite a few of these larger hearts which all had different variations of the gingham and this lovely little red with the dot, and I think I'm going to use this one. And this again is just going to be very, very simple. I've got a selection of hearts here. This one I just thought I would glue down, maybe with a heart. If you wanted something that was more for a female, you could do that little bow with a rose and then put a sentiment at the top. Otherwise I've got that little one with a pearl. You could do a gold one, you could do a silver one, fancy gold one, well, ganza with gold, a plain red ribbon, a white one, or like that. But I think because this is probably going to go to a woman, or let's say I'll be making it as a female version of the card, I'm going to stick with this. So this is very simple, this process. Again, we're just going to turn it over. We're going to put a few dots of our Elmer's glue on this. Because it's quite big and broad in the middle, oopsie, I'm going to just make sure that I have some of the glue in the center like that, and it does spread really nice and evenly. Right, so we're going to press that down,
like that. And then I'm going to just take some, maybe I'll take, what shall I use? No, I think I'll just stick with this. I'll put this on the back in a blob. Just going to lift a bit of that up off there, and I'm going to glue that just in the V of the heart, like that, and leave that to dry. So out of one piece of paper where I've glued down all the pieces of red fabric that I had, I've already got 3 lovely heart-shaped cards. Simple as they might be, they are really nice, and yeah, I'm very happy with that. You've got a whole selection of things you could choose from out of all your different embroidery cottons. You've got buttons, you've got ribbons, you've got bows. So I hope this just gives you an idea of what you can do with very little, and especially your offcuts. Anyway, please consider subscribing to my channel and give me a like if you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Bye.